years ago did you guys go to Alaska? 2?
3.
3? Okay.
14.
I didn't wear a shirt. I don't know how I missed that. When these guys came back from their trip, they said they really wanted to go back there. They said it was such a special place. And they had such a good time, although they were all walking fine when they got home. And so they planned it to do it this year, primarily because one of the guys that's not here tonight had to wait until he retired to go. So, which they did, and they put the trip together. So, Alan, Dave, and Rob, we look forward to what you have to say tonight.
Yeah, can we get pretty much all the lights at the back?
Come on and talk about the stickers.
Okay. Yeah, while you're doing that, I'll talk about the stickers before the lights go out. So you see these really catchy stickers here. I haven't discussed this with the rest of the executive, but I've ended up with a box of them. And they're not going anywhere fast. And then a friend of mine, John Abercrombie, said, well, people have black paddles. They don't show up. That's not very safe. You could put those stickers on. Wouldn't that look great? And it'll be safer. And he's right. So, if you would like to become safer with your black paddle, take a sticker, or 2, or 3, or 4, one for each side. And help yourself, please, because they're just there.
Are they seal proof?
I want to test that right away. Okay. Ready?
Lights. Story.
Get the lights. So you're gonna.
They're free stickers too. I can do that for you.
Okay, so I'm going to give you just a quick overview. Can people at the back see? Is that maybe a little bit of light would be good or not? Or is that good? Better off with no lights. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to do an introduction, and then maybe a couple things as we go in. Then Rob here is going to take it right way through to Juneau, and then you'll hear from David briefly, but he'll do color commentary pretty much all the time. And we've invited others you'll hear about to do the same. And then I'll pick it up and we'll take it through. And we're kind of hoping we're not here for 3 hours, but I have to tell you, it's a real risk. Because we had such a good time. We're just going to get into it here and enjoy ourselves. It was revisiting Alaska and taking our time, which we didn't do last time because we just kept going. Okay, well. So this is the paddling, so-called paddling fanatics. You recognize the 3 suspects here. This is our friend from Vancouver, Henry Grayman, who can't be here tonight. Oh yeah, thanks. We've got Henry included in the presentation. We'll tell stories about him. He's not here to object. So that's us, and this is us in front of the Marjory Glacier on the Glacier Bay cruise boat that took us up. The MV Baranov, and we got our picture taken by somebody else you could see, all 4 shining faces. This is us partway down the Seymour Canal, which is part of Admiralty Island, where we were stuck for a couple of days because of weather, so we got real creative with these shell things. And took our picture. I don't even remember.
White stones.
Yeah. Nobody else took that picture, so that's probably why it looks like that. And this is us with some other suspects in the shot. Do you want to say something about that, Vic? We ran into Vic and Barbara. Who knew? You could go like 2,000 miles and run into people from around the corner. So they happened to be there at the same time we were. And we ran into each other on the way to Glacier Bay, and we're really happy to share some of our adventure with those 2. And this is us having had a nice meal, I think, in the Glacier Bay Lodge at the end of our sort of week out paddling around Glacier Bay, right? Okay, so an overview of the trip, real quick. This is what we did. We drove to Bellingham, which is the southern terminus of the Alaska ferry system, Alaska Marine Highway system. We took that ferry from Bellingham all the way to Juneau, then you switched ferries, and that's where we met these guys, and went on to Gustavus, which is the port nearest Glacier Bay. That took 3 days to get there. This is the problem with Alaska. You took and then once you get off at Gustavus, you need a shuttle van to take. We took all our boats and gear and stuff to the Glacier Bay National Park, because it's across the peninsula at Bartlett Cove. Then we took this boat you saw us smiling from before, the Baranov, and they dropped us up in the northern west arm of Glacier Bay. And we had a base camp there at the mouth of Reed Inlet, did day paddles. The Baranov picked us up again at a predetermined spot, and we get back to Gustavus, take the ferry back to Juneau. Then we spent a couple of days in Juneau, one of which was July the 4th, kind of fun. And the Americans are very into their July the 4th, so it was fun to see that go on. And then we spent 2 weeks paddling from Juneau down to Petersburg. And on the way, we had some adventures. Did a portage by rail car, saw Brown Bear Sanctuary, went across Stevens Passage, and then we saw the Humpback Whales at Cape Fanshawe. And Thomas Bay was pretty cool as well. Finally, we get back to the ferry, back to Bellingham, drive back to Victoria. A month. I mean, can you think of a better way to spend a month? You should take notes. This is something you need to do. So this is us. We kind of did the Glacier Bay part, and then back down here. And then the part that's missing is us taking the ferry. And then this is us on our way down from Juneau to Petersburg. These are actually taken off the inReach, and we did the inReach, drop a GPS breadcrumb and that sort of stuff on our way, so people could keep in touch. Over to Rob.
Okay. Firstly, the pictures you're going to see are Alan's and mine and our friend Henry's, who isn't here. Alan's done almost all the work on this, so I think he decided to make me do most of the talking. He also decided to do a non-linear presentation, so it isn't just going smoothly from beginning to end, so you have to pay attention. Just wanted to make that clear. So this is just the Glacier Bay section. This was about a 5-hour tour on the Baranov into our base camp, and then off we went into the wilderness. And this is just, you can see the ice, there's just ice everywhere. This is Johns Hopkins Inlet, this is Marjory Glacier, and Lamplugh, which you'll see in a minute, is down here, and Reed Glacier is in here. And a little bit more you can see, that's an aerial shot. So the ice literally comes right down to the water. These are known as tidal glaciers. So they're affected by the ocean, and you get the calving, the big chunks coming off. And I mean big. A small one is as big as my house. And Reed Glacier, we're actually at low tide, you can walk on the beach, so that was pretty cool. First day, we had been to Marjory Glacier on the tour boat, and I said, let's go there in the boats. And the guys said, well, how far is it? And I said, oh, it's maybe around, maybe 10 miles each way. I knew it was 25, but if I told them if it was a 25-mile trip, they wouldn't have gone. And I figured as soon as we started seeing ice, they wouldn't care how far it was. And I didn't really tell them until after we got back that they paddled 25 miles. So this is our first ice contact. These tiny little chunks started floating around. And this one, there's actually, my boat is in there, you can't see it, but these two chunks of ice are connected by an underwater bridge, which is just deep enough for me to paddle the boat over the bridge, step out of the kayak, and stand knee deep between these pieces of iceberg.
Not recommended, I don't think.
And you can also want you to notice this, how barren this is. And I'll get into a little bit more about that later, but these mountains go up about 6,000 feet. And we got some glittering ice going here. And that's wind, very cold wind coming off.
Okay, here we are at the Marjory Great Glacier in Glacier Bay. I think this is as close as I want to go. Thing is making a bit of noise, and sometimes big chunks of ice fall off, like some of those guys up there.
You can see the crack. That guy's getting ready to go. And that's like 10 stories tall, that face that you're looking at.
Sorry about the fast movement. I just heard something. I thought maybe it was going to drop. Yeah, we're going to have David come paddle through the shot here.
That's Canada in the background.
And man, you can hear that thing banging and thumping. I don't know if you can hear on the video or not. That big pile of dirt in the background is what used to be the front of the Grand Pacific Glacier, which is the biggest around here. It's receded way back. And those mountains you're looking at are actually in Canada.
Notice he lets me get closer. He doesn't want to go down. Keep going, it'll make a better shot. Wait till you see when they desert me later on.
It's another boom from the ice. I keep hoping something's going to fall off. But
So if something fell off, you'd be surfing then?
What happens is there's a big wave that comes up and then it hits this floating ice and it stops the wave from coming out to where, sorry, if I, let me know if I'm blocking you.
that's Alan's way over there.
He's at a safe distance.
On my way to Canada.
And Henry's back out there somewhere. I don't think he wants to come too close, but you can see the valley we're in. These mountains are pretty spectacular. Glaciers all over the place.
400 years ago, this valley did not exist. And it was a meadow and people lived there. And the ice came down and pushed everybody
I
out.
think I'll stop this now.
And then it slowly started to recede, and it went back to its sort of normal part, and then with global warming, it's continued to recede. So a lot of the land you're going to see looks like this because it hasn't had enough time to grow anything. And it's just some more shots of the ice. Keep going. You get all these fantastic shapes. What happens is that you get melt and you get dirt on the top, and the mud and the rock get all tied up into the ice, and then it comes off. And the shapes are just amazing. They look like mermaids and bears and airplanes and pretty much everything you can think of. It's very cool. And Eagles found himself a spot to land on. Now, Reed Glacier, go ahead. This is really close to our camp. We could paddle over there in about an hour, so I didn't make the guys go 25 miles this time. A lot of the land is like this, and that's what we're camped on. You go around the point, and you can walk right up to it. So you can see the size of these blocks, and if you go to the next slide, there's David. He's using his paddle like a walking stick. This water in places is flowing quite fast. It's running right off the glacier, and you can't see how deep it is. So you think it's only 6 inches, and it might turn out to be 3 feet. So he was kind of probing with that. So that last picture of the blocks over my head is only this little bit of rubble right there. So you get an idea of the scale, and this is one of the smaller ones. So Low Tide Beach is a few hundred meters. Lamplugh was a little farther up the coast. We've got another little video here.
The top of that cave in there just fell in about a minute ago. I gotta take my glove off to work the camera, but it's pretty cold. But very cool.
This is one of my favorite glaciers. It's very impressive. About the Catabatic, right?
Yeah, that's Catabatic wind that you're hearing coming off the glacier.
We're some more mountains. Hopkins Inlet, which is maybe where we're gonna go in a couple of days.
We're going to go around that corner into another one later on. When you're right in front of the glacier, it's windy and it's really cold.
Mountains
You
all
get away
around.
from it and the temperature changes quite a bit. But it just rips off of all that ice, which goes back into the mountains for miles. It's very cool being down that kayak level.
Anyway, that's probably enough ice.
can just kind of keep going through these. Alan?
What kind of camera do you have?
It's just a little Nikon hot shot, cool shot.
Right, cool.
Just
Yeah.
cool pics, cool pics, yeah. And yeah, I'll just sort of flash through these. We did see chunks, a lot of these, 3 or 4 or 5 times, you hear this boom and this house-sized piece comes off, but of course, by the time you get the camera over there, and they'd never want to go, oh, is this another video?
Okay, it took me a minute to get turned around in the wind. It's hard to see.
This is Lato again.
Yes, it's what it cut.
I think that's David up there.
Yeah, that's enough. Okay, Johns Hopkins is my favorite place. The part where we're paddling has only not been ice for less than 100 years. And Glacier Bay is, the whole thing is about 65 nautical miles deep. And when people like Malaspina and, was it Vancouver or Cook, when they were there, that entire 65 nautical miles was full of ice and it was 4,000 feet thick. And it has gone back and back and back, as I said, to its original spot at the beginning of what is now Johns Hopkins, and then it has receded further up into Johns Hopkins. So this is us going into pretty new territory. This is a nautical mile wide. It was really cold in there. I actually loved it. You can see it's just rock, and in the last sort of 50 years you're getting a little bit of lichen starting to grow. But it's pretty much dead, barren, very stark. The water that I'm sitting on is 1,200 feet deep. The mountains go up 6,000 on both sides, just up into the clouds. It's quite spectacular. David had enough. And this was the best place we could find to land. It's actually even steeper than it looks, and there's water cascading down here that's roaring away. And you can see the beach here, and I landed first, and I made sure when David was coming in, there was too much wind noise for me to talk to him, but I stood on the beach, and I put my paddle in a foot from shore, and he looked at me, and then I went like this, and it disappeared. It just goes straight down. So we had these really cool landings where you kind of slide out of the side of your boat.
Well, just, so these guys decide to go on, but I've sort of had enough of this, because Barbara, who'd been up there the day before, I think, had said there's gorgeous waterfalls, and there were amazing waterfalls. So I was just keen after we had our lunch break to get back and go spend more time with the waterfalls rather than seeing another glacier. But so these guys left me here, so then I had to get back in my boat. I knew if I screwed up on this,
Be an ice cube.
I was probably gonna die. And I have a bad habit of kind of screwing up on these kind of launches, but I made it. You can see I made it.
Go ahead, Alan.
Good.
Oh, Fred, just back up to that one. No, that one.
Oh, that one.
That one. There, you can see how packed together the ice is at this point. You literally have to thread your way through. And this is about a mile off the face of the glacier. And David, we'd left back there, and Alan was getting cold. And carry on, I wanted to go farther. So I headed off a little bit, and I finally sort of relented and said, okay, you guys are freezing, we can go home now. But it was my absolute favorite part, except for maybe the whales. So this is an artist's impression of Glacier Bay, what it looked like about 450 years ago. And the story is that the ice moved as fast as a dog walks. And it just pushed everybody and everything out quite quickly. And in the process, with all that weight, it just gouged out this huge valley and then gouged it again as it retreated. So the Tlingit are, just in the last few years, are beginning to move back in, but of course they're up at the mouth, not way back, because there's no land there anymore. And it's really interesting as you progress from the mouth to the back of the bay, how the vegetation and the wildlife changes. So you go from Johns Hopkins, where it's just gray rock and ice, 10 miles back at our camp. I'll show you some very contrasting pictures later.
All right.
So now we're jumping out of Glacier Bay and we're going into theme 3, which is logistics and the value of kayak wheels.
Okay, just to remember.
So just a reminder, these are all the things that we had to do in order to do these trips. We had 3 times vans booked. That's okay, go to the next one. This is the big ferry, the 3-day ferry on the way up. Some people chose to sleep in tents on the deck. Some people chose cots under the roof. And this is Henry and David and Alan. At night, they slept on this bench. I was the only one who wasn't so cheap. I actually had a stateroom with a real bed in it.
So your tent's on the deck, were you using duct tape to hold?
Yes,
Yeah.
I didn't do that, but yeah, that's what people do. They duct tape them, gorilla tape down to the deck if there happens to be a railing. Some people got blown apart.
Yeah.
One night
One
and-
morning, one was hanging off by its duct tape.
One night there were many fewer tents in the morning than there were at night. Yeah.
People went inside.
So it's an interesting trip. By far, all the many kayak trips I've taken, this is the most logistically complicated and by far the most expensive. It's a massive amount of planning involved.
Just to point out that the figure in the far corner is actually a woman that we met. She was born in, I guess, Ketchikan, was it, David? Or?
Yeah.
Anyway, but she lives in Washington, and she's done this trip since she was, as long as she can remember, she's done this ferry trip. And she's so good at it. So this, where she is the best place if you ever take the trip. It's the best place on the boat that's cheap, that doesn't cost you money. We actually slept on the floor on our pads, but she slept on the bench. And she can just go sleep. She said the sound of the engine in this is like an old ferry, you know, like that, and it just lulls her to sleep. And she was like gone. We're waking up trying
I
to
had my own bathroom with my own shower.
We had free showers.
Yeah.
We had free showers. We had our own bathroom just sort of over a bit.
And you get to save your $500.
Okay, wheels. This is at Bartlett Cove. This is the wide end, the mouth of Glacier Bay. And again, 400 years ago, this was a wall of ice. We had some discussion before we left whether we needed to have wheels or not. Alan and I insisted that we did, and we ended up winning the day. So every time we used the wheels, I wrote it down in my journal, 17 times we used our wheels. And a number of times with fully loaded boats, everything piled on there. So. And I think we had 3 times Alan had pre-booked a van with a trailer to carry our stuff. Going from across from Gustavus to Bartlett Cove, back from Bartlett Cove to Gustavus, and then later on when we came back to Juneau, the ferry is a long way from the city, so we had to have another ride going into Juneau. This is the MV Baranov. There are other tour groups that weren't camping with us, but they take a bunch of people out at once. So they just run this boat into the beach, and then you have to hoist the kayaks off from about this height. I think I loaded 18 on the pickup day.
They're heavy.
They're heavy, and all the gear. Americans have not figured out kayaking in IKEA bags. So anytime there's a blue IKEA bag, we knew it belonged to one of the 4 of us, which actually came in pretty handy. But everyone was going, where'd you get those bags? Those are so awesome. So the next time, if you go there, it's probably going to be taken over by IKEA bags.
So those must all be Alan's bags? Why did you put Siska stickers on your bag?
So this is leaving Juneau. This is launching in Juneau, and again, you can see wheels and things. We had about 1.5 miles from our hotel, which we had been driven to, about 1.5 miles from there to get to the closest launching point. So we persuaded the hotel people, instead of driving bodies to the airport like they usually do, they would drive kayak gear to the beach. So 2 of us loaded multiple bags into the hotel van, 2 others left early with their boats, and anyway, we all ended up, 4 of us, and I actually fully loaded my boat right here, and then just pulled it down the ramp like a fisherman launching his boat into the water, and took the wheels off in the water. And then disassembled them and had them in a deck bag. Henry usually left his like that. It was actually funny in the distance from behind. It looked like when he got to land, he'd just have to flip his boat and wheel him up, but it wasn't quite that easy. And we used them on the beaches a couple of times. We'll get into big tides later, but there are a lot of them. There's Henry with his wheel-ready boat. And another time we used them on the beach. I don't know if we're launching or landing, but either way, they came in pretty handy.
But it's pretty neat loading a boat on wheels, because you can tip it one way and stick the stuff in, and then you can tip it the other way, and you don't have to bend down as far. It's quite, I mean, I'm sold on wheels now.
And he was a hard sell. We told him, yeah, you not take wheels, but you're carrying your boat alone, but I think that did the trick.
On that slide you got from the hotel, like that boat ramp,
Yeah.
those look like serious tights.
Yes. Yes.
Is that 25 feet? Or?
Yes, up to 25 feet. I
Wow.
think the biggest swing we had on this trip was about 17
Yeah, wasn't it?
in one day,
Wow.
but they are up to 25.
Wow.
Yeah.
Notice the nice blue sky there? See all,
Wrong way.
notice all the blue sky we had?
Yeah. It's whitish blue. There's the last one. Okay, back here.
There we go. We had a little fog for a couple of days, but it didn't last too long, and we knew where we were going. We had charts and GPS, a deadly combination. So, you can see how much it can switch. We came out of a bank just like that into bright sun, and then we went back into another one. Grizzly bears. We saw grizzly bears in Glacier Bay. We saw some along the shore here, and I was telling you before we were in Johns Hopkins how stark it is, and our base camp is here, which is about 10 miles away. More ice. You can see Lamplugh, Johns Hopkins down there. It's about 10 miles from here to here. So we're going from, this is camp.
Behind our camp.
Yeah, but 10 miles difference, you're going from stark rock and ice to this and this.
Good photo for the wildflower people. It was spring in Glacier Bay.
Carry on. And came back from camp, and there was a friend grizzly bear. Brown bears, they call them in Alaska, wandering around. So there he is. This is Henry's tent. Those previous pictures, he was more like in here. He was there for about 5 hours, maybe longer.
Well, you guys have been watching him for hours before.
Yeah.
And had a heart attack.
Didn't you give him a name, Barbara?
No,
I thought, no, you.
But he was huge,
Yeah.
huge solo male. But he obviously, we made sure that he could see us and made a bit of noise, and it was like, he's down here, this is mine, you guys are up there, there's nothing to eat in the gravel, and we just kind of left each other alone. So it was pretty cool.
He didn't look at us, I think that's the look he gave us, that it was
Yeah.
total disdain.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, oh. But you know, but I knew Vic was there, so I wasn't worried a bit about this bear, because I knew I could run faster than him.
So
Yeah.
Henry had gone off on a solo kayak trip because he was still cursing me for the 25-mile round trip first day. So he didn't go to Lamplugh with us, he took the day off. And then this day, when we did a short trip to Reed, he went whale watching. And probably you guys don't know Henry, but he has quite thick glasses. And when he's out on the boat, they get fogged up, and he really can't see very well.
Can't see anything.
So he's paddling back from here, and Alan is in there going, Henry, Henry, there's a bear! And he's going, what? What? And he was here, and he said, oh my God, there's a bear!
No, Henry said, holy Moses, that's about as profane as Henry is. Holy Moses, and he backpedaled fast.
So at this point, he was backing up.
Yeah, he was.
And he's going backwards, and the bear's kind of wandering around, and the bear's sort of giving him a look like, this is my beach, buddy. And eventually, he turned around and went back into his meadow, and Henry was able to land.
Oh, this
But
is
before we go into these bears,
Yeah,
so on Henry's day trip, he went by himself, right? He wanted to go see whales. And he got two kind of neat experiences. He saw, because he saw a whale, a humpback came up right beside him, which is.
Yeah, he said it was so close he could have touched it with his paddle,
Yeah.
which he didn't.
And I don't think he realized at that time, and I didn't realize either until we went to a lecture at UVic, how dangerous humpback whales are. Because they have no sense of anything else around them. They just pop up. And he also saw a sea otter, because there was lots of otters up there, right? And you know, when you get close to them, they just disappear. Well, he came on one that was actually eating his lunch or something, laying on his back, had a rock in one hand and a clam, and he's going like this and not paying attention. And Henry just sort of watching, and then he looks up and sees him and disappears. That's Henry's story.
Okay, carry on.
More on bears.
This is being our bear theme. This is a completely different place, and much later in the trip, it's a place called Cascade Creek. And this is a designated bear watching area. I keep creeping in and blocking you, so just wave me back. And you have to book ahead of time to be allowed into this place, and it's like $25 for a group. It's not a lot of money, but it's all controlled, and you have to arrange a certain day and time that you can be there, and there are rangers, and you have to follow all these rules, but you can get right up on this little peninsula, and the bears are out. There's a mom and a couple of cubs, and they're just around. This one I really like. So we saw 2 or 3 sets of moms and babies, and one old female who's like 30 or 35 or something. And she had bald patches on her fur and one gimpy leg where it had been broken.
Rob, were you on a blind or up on a platform?
It wasn't a blind. We were in 2 little designated areas that are kind of 30 feet, and if you look to one side, you're looking out at this huge low-tide beach where Cascade Creek runs out, and they're wandering around there. And if you look to the other side, they're in this little sort of grassy estuary. And they just kind of roam around, and you're not really allowed to do anything except stand there and whisper. And they know you're there, but you're as unobtrusive as possible so you don't interrupt them, and you're standing in a place where there isn't food supply, so they don't really want to be up there.
So of course, we 3 arrive, right? We're kind of talking, and we get up there and going, shh, right? Oh. And so then, and there's logs all around this little area. So Rob starts to climb up on a log to get a better picture, and the ranger kind of says, get down, get down. So even though it seems safe, it's obviously not safe, because at one point, the rangers change shifts, and this ranger goes over, and she's looking at that mother bear, and she bends down, she opens this metal box in the ground, never takes her eye off the bear, pulls out this huge rifle, and marches off, right? And then closes the lid, never taking her. So it's obviously, it's very well controlled, but it's not obviously without a lot of caution needed, because they are wild bears.
Okay. Bugs is one of our other themes. There are bugs in Alaska, if you weren't aware of that. Next slide, Alan.
We brought some to model for you here. I'll just flip the lights on so
Yes.
you can appreciate it. This is the bug hat. Yeah, but wide brim is good. Keep the netting out. He doesn't have his on a wide.
Good for eating.
And yes, eating. David will be demonstrating the eating shortly. You'll see that. But absolutely de rigueur, not just in Alaska, of course.
But these bugs are very interesting.
We never really knew what these were. They're huge and they don't bite, but there are just millions of them everywhere that just fly into your nose and all over the place.
And when you're loading your boat, they're going in your hatch, and you're trying to get them out, and you're crushing them, and you know, off from the shore, the water was just covered with them, just dead bodies of these bugs. So, but they didn't bite. They didn't bite. They didn't bite. They didn't bite. They just
bugging.
They just got in everything.
There were biting bugs of many different kinds. Some, go ahead, other places worse than others. So this is me with my hat on, cooking up some food outside of my tent. And the rule supposedly in Glacier Bay is that you're supposed to cook certain distance away from your tent.
Below the high tide line.
And below the high tide line, and they do this nice little video presentation, and it doesn't look too bad. But then you realize after that in all the pictures, there's no wind, there's no bugs, it isn't raining, and the sun is out. And the models are all smilingly eating their dinner. So you go out there and you sit below the high tide line, and the wind is like, and the rain's going sideways, and if it stops, the bugs, and you just kind of, screw this. I'm going under my tarp, at least. So we kind of stretched the rules a little bit. We didn't store food there. We had a separate food cache and bear barrels and stuff, but if the weather was bad, we did cook undercover. And this is what mealtime is supposed to be like. So if you had a nice enough day, we would do that. And you can see we're all fully equipped. And notice, David, the lower hand pulls the bug mesh away so that you can get food into your mouth. Because it's amazing how many times, even though you do this every day, you start talking and you grab a bite of food and shove it right into the bug mesh. It doesn't work out at all. Anyway,
That's the last day I did it. Then I took this is my bug house, and I used that for the rest of the trip. I had a great time. And it's just...
So he brought this half a tent just to cook and eat in. And we're not really sure about because the whole thing about separating the food from your tent is so that the bears don't associate food inside tent-like structures. So this, to me, looks rather like a tent-like structure, even though it was below the high tide line and it was away from his actual tent. None of us were strictly adhering to the rules, so we didn't give him too much of a hard time about it. And I'm going to take a little break, and David's going to talk at you for a bit.
Okay, so this is going back to Juneau, and we had the 4th of July parade that Alan and I got in. And anyway, let's see. So we stayed in a hotel in Juneau, and we parked our kayaks out front, and then this is some of our gear was a little wet, and so we were all madly scrambling for places to hang it. Now you can't see it, but there's a big screen TV on the wall here.
It's underneath that tarp.
Underneath that tarp.
That's where I drew the line.
That's where Alan tried to draw the line. He says, you can't hang them on a big screen TV. We said, yeah, sure we can. So we did.
Can you describe this now to us?
But this is after the room was tidied up. You should have seen it when we arrived, all our wet gear and stuff.
This is reorganized.
This is reorganized, ready to leave.
That was good. That was a 2-bedroom. It was
There's a couple bedrooms in the back around the corner,
just-
and a little kitchenette as well.
Just look as bad.
Yeah. Moving on.
And so then we went to the 4th of July parade. Only Alan and I did. And see, there's the RCMP there. And so I asked them, well, how come you guys are here? And they're from Whitehorse. And the U.S. Folks go up to Whitehorse for July 1st. And they come down. And this is the very start of the parade. So it's kind of neat. And then this is just some shots from the parade. Now the parade goes this way, and then turns around and comes back, so you get the parade on both sides of you. It's great. And then they go across a bridge to the other side of town. So, and here, this is a selfie. Yeah, see, you see the parade coming that way, and it's also going this way.
They're smiling because they've been scooping bags full of candy that have been thrown off the floats
For children.
Yeah, David said he was collecting for his grandchildren. Somehow they never saw any.
They're not allowed to eat sugar, I think.
But in Victoria when they have that parade, they throw out kind of candy, but they're throwing out really good quality candy. Really good. Anyway, let's go.
Okay.
Back to Rob.
I get a short break. So this is another thing that Alan had researched. He did a tremendous amount of research. If you want, I think the next slide is a map.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Juneau, and Petersburg is way down here. So we're coming down the Seymour Canal.
No, that's that's
another canal.
Gastineau Channel.
Gastineau Channel, crossing here, and where Pat Creek, where the bears are that we were looking at, is in here. So if you want to go there by water, you actually have to go like this, which is a long way. It's like 45 more miles than we paddled. But there's this little peninsula here that has a, quote, hand-operated railway that you can use to portage your gear. And there was a nice little pamphlet with these nice rails coming right down to the water. And we kind of imagined these, we know, one of these hand crank things. Now, first of all, we couldn't find the bloody thing. It wasn't where the chart said it was. And we had to paddle against a river of tide to get into this bay.
Poor planning, but whatever.
And I finally said, hey guys, there's a sign. So there used to be, at some point in the distant past, there were rails all the way down there. And you can see remnants of them. And I was there first and walked up. You can see where I'm stopping. I'm inspecting this boardwalk, which has no rails on it. And I'm inspecting again all the way up to the top of the hill and haven't found any rails yet. Go ahead. And so we ended up having to carry the boats from here and all the gear up that hill to the top. And there was the railway, which consisted of 2 of these carts with a rope on each end, one for pushing and one for pulling. And we could fit 2 boats. And then you just kind of trundle off across the muskeg. And if you can imagine building a railway out of wood beams in a swamp, they tend to settle a little bit. If you want to go to the next one. This is about halfway across, and we're probably have just put the gear back on after the 6th or 7th derailment. We got all the boats and half the gear down, and then we went back for the rest of the gear. And anytime you managed to get your speed up more than a very slow walk, you just start to get excited. I'm not even pushing, and there'd be this big crash, and the wheels would come off, and you'd have to lift the gear off and hoist the car back on the tracks. And in some places, the rails were so warped that it would take 4 of us pushing, and the wheels would be going and there was bugs. There were bugs everywhere, and it was hot, and we were sweating, and carry on. But at the end, there's a cabin. Although we got to the end of the rails, and there was no cabin, there was a swamp. And I was not a happy camper, but anyway, we managed to find this cabin about another 100 meters along the path through the woods. So then you have the option of carrying your boats and gear all the way to the cabin, or floating them through this sort of semi-liquid swampy bit. And we tried both, and it was about 50-50. But we did get to the cabin. David's got his bug cabin. There were screens on the windows, and you could close the door. The designer of the bunks and the designer of the mattresses did not communicate. So this, you can see, that's one full-size mattress. This is a half a mattress. Some previous tenant cut in half and tied up with duct tape. And if you were to do this, and so what we had 2 people sleeping feet to feet with their heads on the outside. If you were to do that upstairs, then your head would hit the ceiling when you tried to sit up. So I was on top with one big mattress, 2 guys were on here, and David had another big mattress on the floor. And we made it work. Alan's a happy guy. These are Alaska State Forestry cabins. I think they're $50 a night for a group. So you can book ahead of time. You can just show up and take your chances and stay for free, and probably nobody will know, but if there happens to be somebody there, you're screwed. There's pretty much no place to camp. It's right on that, from swamp to Tidal Beach with a cabin stuck there in this case.
This is the next.
And this is the next one, which we'll get some more detail to a little later. It was much nicer. Lovely beach. Easy to pull the boats right up below. Inside we had the bunks actually fit. You used your own mattress, which was just fine, but they were properly sized, and nice little wood stove. So that was great. We stayed there a couple of nights. We were all pretty happy at that point. just a little, this is
Another sunny day.
Thomas Bay. Go ahead. And monster tides, somebody was asking me about monster tides. So we're now back at the first cabin. I'm standing on the porch. And this looks like grass, but it's swamp. And then the navigable water is way out here. And you have to get all your stuff and your boat somehow across that. And we left on a 12-foot tide. And I figure really you want 15. If you want to just mostly paddle away from the cabin, you've probably got about 15 feet of water. So we dragged the boats down to this little creek, which I had stomped off and sort of decided it wasn't very good. We ended up carrying across that little path through the reeds to this second creek. All our gear, couldn't use the wheels because the ground was too rough and swampy, poles, loaded everything in this, and you could sort of not really paddle, but float and walk, and you had to get out to there before you could actually get into your boat and paddle away. So it took us half a day just to get out of that cabin. It was a hell of a lot of work. Go ahead.
Okay.
Wind forecast support. Here she is, right here. It's wonderful having accurate wind forecasts every day when you're in the middle of nowhere. This is my wife Lisa at home. She would look up, predict wind, and then using our InReach system would text us wind forecasts for the area that we were in for the next morning and throughout the day. So we could plan, if we had a big crossing, we could decide if we were going to do it or if we were going to stay or what. So it was great. The state weather forecasting in Alaska is about as useful for kayakers as Environment Canada is here, meaning not much. They give you the highest wind in the middle of whatever strait, and so the detail we got from Predict Wind was just great. So thank you, Lisa. Humpback whales.
Ooh, I think that's
Man, I think Alan is up. I'll let him talk, but boy, did we see some humpback whales. It was very cool.
So when we went to Alaska the time before, David and I made it to Juneau. We saw the ice, little icebergs right off Holcomb Bay or whatever it was. We saw whales kind of in the distance, and so heard them, the spouts and stuff. I don't know if we saw bears or not, but so we thought, well, we're going to go back and we're going to soak up, southeast Alaska. We want to see those glaciers right up close. We want to see those bears if we can. We want to see the whales. I think maybe the whales left the biggest impression on me. So if you're doing this, think about Cape Fanshawe. Cape Fanshawe is the point of land on the mainland there, which juts out into a confluence of 3 big channels, and it must be very rich in marine life, because consistently humpback whales go there to feed. This will be a little video. Okay, this is Cape Fanshawe, take 2. David and I were here a few years ago, had a fabulous time camping. So good that we came back. And here we are. As David is finishing putting up his multiple shelters. It's always very intricate. What'd you like about today's paddle, David?
Noodling the shore, seeing lots of interesting rocks and trees, and seeing some starfish. Great.
Excellent.
Lots of whales.
David went like another 5 miles than the rest of us because he insisted on noodling everything. Very good. It's my tent. We're just coming down the beach to visit Henry. Henry's finished his dinner. What did you like about today's paddle, Henry?
This is the Pebble Beach. I love that.
This one here, Cape Fanshawe.
This is just a fantastic place for camping. Pebble Beach, sunny, warm. There's a bit of a breeze. There's no bugs.
Wow,
And
it's perfect.
it's fantastic.
And-
Best one we've had.
And the whale show.
And there's a whale show, absolutely.
All right. So Henry is set up with Rob. They've collaborated. Look at that tarp rope. Isn't that impressive? It's got to be, I don't know, 80 feet long. Henry carries an 80-foot rope. Well, it worked out well here. So Rob,
Yes,
great paddle today?
that was lovely.
Yeah. What did you like best?
It was flat calm. We had a lovely beach for lunch. And
Yeah.
ended up in a beautiful place with whales all the way along, sea lions. Just a gorgeous day. And it was 20 miles. It was a really good workout.
Yeah. Yeah. Not surprisingly, Rob got here first. All right, and I'm just going to pan out here so you can see these amazing rocks. It's like an art gallery, sculpture gallery. There are standing rocks. There are sitting rocks, which I'm told are kind of like a personal spa. You can lie down and find the place you need to rub. And then out there past the cape itself and all the way around, just nature at its best. Cape Fanshawe, make sure you get here. Okay, so one of the things we saw at Cape Fanshawe, you may know more about this than we did at the time, but was humpback whales bubble feeding. And I know Mary saw them up Swiftsure Bank, I think, Mary, others probably. But I was under the impression that humpback whales were great big and maybe not too smart. And no. These are really clever creatures, and they work like wolf packs. And there was maybe a dozen whales in a group that were working together, and this little graphic shows you how they do it, to surround a school of fish, drive them up with bubbles that they release underneath them, and then keep them in a cylinder in the water until they can come up all together with their great big huge mouths open and just chow down on all these little fish. And it's an amazing thing to watch. So we saw them doing this all day long. Like, it was boring. After a while, you're like, oh, they're at it again. It was so amazing that we didn't get tired of it, but, it was like time after time after time. And one of the things I want to mention is this fella here. So we got there towards evening, I guess, and then we stayed the next day and 2 nights. And this fellow's name is Norio Matsumoto. And Norio is a wildlife photographer like a National Geographic quality, world sort of class.
He comes here every year.
Every year for 7 years, he's come to Cape Fanshawe. He sets up a permanent camp, and he goes out and he spends like 12 hours standing in this little inflatable he's got, with a little motor, and he's rigged up with a huge camera that he has kind of a harness around his chest. He's not a big guy. And he does this solo, and he is fascinated by the humpbacks, and he must have some incredible pictures, and I'll mention his site later because he sells them obviously, but he does, and he's a nice guy. We talked to him when he came back that first evening, and then we got to see him in action. So this one has a bit of a story. I twisted my ankle the morning after we got there, and I was feeling, oh geez, I hope that's not going to bug my paddling, so I wanted to go out and try the kayak. And Norio's out there following the whales. You don't know exactly where they're going to come up, but he gets pretty good at guessing. And he doesn't want to get too close, but he wants to be close enough, And so he's going, and we thought, okay, well, they're probably out there. Well, let's just kind of go out and hang out. I think, Rob, you're going to come with me. But I was already in my kayak. I push off, and I'm just out. Oh, okay, I'm not using my ankle too much. It feels okay. And I thought, I'm just going to set up behind Norio, because he probably knows where they're going to come up. I don't want to be right there. So I go there, and I think the next one here, Rob, yeah. This is what happened. So the distance here between Norio and this guy, I think is less than 10 feet. And what happened was he stands at the edge of his boat with this thing because he wants to get close, but he sometimes misjudges.
He wasn't expecting him to come up anywhere near that close.
Yeah.
He kind of guesses.
So he has his camera like this, and he came up and he went like this. In his inflatable, right? Just immediate. And then he reset. Pictures, right? So I was like blown away that I thought, oh, he's going to get eaten up here or something. And when I realized, no, he's just doing his job, he was a little surprised, I took this picture. So I've sent him the pictures. I haven't heard from him, but I hope to make contact because I thought, that's a picture he doesn't get, right? And that's kind of cool. So if you go back to the one on him, we're not going to.
Which one?
One more?
This one?
Yeah. Just want to say, this is his website. It's called braingiants.com. And this is a little bit about him. It's worth just checking him out. Really nice fella. ordinary, easy to talk to kind of guy, but we heard from somebody else, he's like one of the handful of really amazing photographers for these particular things. In the summer, he does this.
In the winter, go to his website, you won't believe the winter what he does. He goes to the top of some
Mount McKinley.
Denali,
I
and
guess.
builds a snow house, cave, and stays there for
Couple months.
a couple of months, taking pictures of the moon and
The light and
mountains
so
and the
forth.
light. His photographs are amazing. And he has to tamp, and somebody comes and picks him up on a plane, he has to tamp down the runway, right? Shows him, okay. This guy is really committed.
So I don't know if you've ever been to the Wildlife Photographer of the Year thing, but he's one of those kind of guys. So here's a little video.
This is Rob's
Always
video.
just missed them coming out of the water.
It's true. They're mopping up after a bubble fishing thing, right? They're just kind of. According to that lady who knows humpbacks better than most, they're about the size of a school bus. That's the international unit of measurement for humpback whales.
How did they make that loud noise?
They're making it through their blowholes. And the first, we called that guy, I don't know, what did I call him? Bugler, called him Bugle Boy. And there were different groups of whales, and we hadn't heard that one before. And we were sitting on the beach, and we, like Al said, we almost would get bored, because we watched this for hours and hours and hours. And we'd hear this, wah, what the hell is that? And we didn't think it was a whale. We
No.
thought it was some blasting whistle or something.
Yeah, like a
And
warning.
eventually they came around the point, and it was this one whale. He'd come up, and you could see it timed with the spray. It was clearly coming from him. And it would echo, like that volume you're hearing is pretty accurate to what we were hearing on the beach. It would just echo all over the cape. It was amazing.
So you
So I
took
think
that
that's
from the
what it is.
beach?
Yeah, yeah, that was shot from sitting on the beach.
That's just a short one, so is this, I think.
Wow.
This one's from the boat, so it's a bit bouncy. So, yeah, it really was amazing. So, the area that we were on our way to from Cape Fanshawe is down here in Thomas Bay. But this is Cape Fanshawe up here, and you can see the bodies of water, and Stevens Passage goes here up towards Juneau. So somehow the nutrients that come into this area just make a huge feeding ground for these guys. So, write that down, Cape Fanshawe. Not very far from Petersburg. You could probably hire a boat Yeah,
maybe there
if
in
you
like
could
an hour.
fly in or boat into Petersburg, you could just go Petersburg, Cape Fanshawe and back.
Or
Just-
ferry?
Yeah, you could ferry into Petersburg and paddle from there. It's, can I see this?
Yeah.
So we camped there, and we count there, and we count there. So these are 1 day, 1, 2, 3 days from Petersburg to Cape Fanshawe.
How many months are they there to that?
Well, I think for at least 1 or 2. They were, let's see, that was early July?
Yeah, and we hit prime time, which was, you know, more luck than design.
They were still there in mid-August.
Okay, yeah.
So I was up there.
So the warm months, and then they head south, right?
The same, were they doing the same thing? Were they doing the same thing?
Oh, yeah, they were there all summer.
And
basically.
making the bugling as well? Wow.
That's amazing. So, what was that lady's name, Jenny? Hildebrand?
Jackie, they'll do it.
Yeah,
Jackie
based
Hill-
out of
Campbell River?
Yeah.
She's with, I don't know, a nonprofit I can't remember the name of, but she's a real expert. We went to one of her presentations up at UVic, and she's a very entertaining speaker as well. But she was talking about them as being like musical, like they in the South when they're having their young. I guess they make they sing. They
Glacier Bay?
make different sounds.
I've heard them in Glacier Bay.
You heard them in Glacier Bay?
Starting.
So this we wanted to show you a pretty amazing beach.
It's the
I think-
nicest beach we have. This
Yeah.
is high tide, of course.
Yes,
This
it
is a day south of Cape Fanshawe.
Right, and it's called Vanderput.
Vanderput, yeah.
And it's made
Here's
from
low tide.
low tide. It's a little different. You got to get to the water again. But it's made by the glacier that came out of Thomas Bay. That's what we're going into next, and where we stayed in a cabin for a couple nights. And this whole thing has been created by the glaciers that have now retreated back up inside Thomas Bay. So here we came into a Cascade Creek area, which is a stop on the tour boats, but nice little cabin
You
there.
can see a
saw
little,
pictures.
can you just point at the little bit of white right there? That's Cascade Creek, which you'll see again in a minute. You can hike over there, and where we are is on the front of the
We're
cabin.
kind of in here, the cabin is back here someplace. And this is Rob
This
on
is
the
Cascade
trip.
Creek. It looks like it's raining, but it isn't. It's just spray off there. Henry and I went for a hike one day and walked maybe a mile up this creek. Gorgeous waterfalls. It's really beautiful.
And you saw a porcupine.
Came
Rob.
back with a porcupine on our beach.
Don't think we've ever seen a porcupine on a trip.
Never seen one before.
Who knew? And we met some other people. This is the cool thing too about going to a place like that. You meet beyond Vic and Barbara, adventure spirits, you meet others. So this guy here is Dennis Dwyer. I don't know, does anybody else know who Dennis Dwyer is? He has written online several books, and he's done the trip from like Anacortes or San Juan Island or whatever to Skagway 3 times, I think, by himself. He's paddled up in Prince William Sound. He went up this time to circumnavigate Admiralty Island. That's where the Pack Creek Brown Bear Sanctuary was. He was going to go around it. It's a huge island. So that was his trip plan. And he said he left Juneau, and it rained for like a week.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't need to do this. And he went home. Well, not exactly home. He's fallen in love with the Northwest Coast, and he has friends in the Seattle, Bellingham area. So he went back there to do some paddling around the San Juans. But we thought, oh, good on you, Dennis, because, you know, what comes through is like, this is a guy who's determined he's going to finish the trip and all that. He's like, you know, life's too short for this. Raining too much, I'm going home. So we got to talk to him.
He was the inspiration for us doing the trip, the first trip.
Yeah, the first trip we paddled
Yeah.
from here to Alaska. I don't know if everybody here knows that or not, but 3 years ago we went from Willows Beach. I went as far as Ketchikan, and these 2 guys went to Juneau.
And the reason he's close to my heart is he does all of this in a wetsuit. So we had some great conversations about the merits of wetsuits, which was great.
So he may not be that intelligent.
But you saw the date we left sort of in June, right? And remember kind of what spring was like here, how crappy it was? And then it got really hot and stayed really nice. Well, we managed to take the crappy weather all the way with us.
We did.
Because the people in Juneau were complaining this is the worst summer they've ever had.
They don't complain easily.
And we got to experience
We
it.
did, yeah.
And then we came back to the rest of this summer.
So Dennis has done these amazing trips, and you can find him online easily, by the way. And this guy, Charles Chandler. So Charles, he's a very interesting guy. He's like a mechanical engineer. Am I making that up? Some kind of an engineer. Right now he calls himself an eco-activist.
Something like that, yeah.
And he's very precise, and he's very quiet. And he does these incredible things.
Slow talker.
Very slow talker. Yeah, you want to just pace yourself with Charles. And he does these amazing things. So after this, he had gone from Anacortes or somewhere like that up to Skagway, and he had a boat which was a Terran. Anyway, he had a boat which was beautiful, and it looked like it just came out of the showroom. And he said, you should go down and look on the deck next time it's open. So I did. I said, Charles, that's an amazing boat. I've never seen one like it, but it looks like you haven't used it. And you just come up, did you really do that trip, Charles? And he said, yes. I never come on the shore with the kayak. I land in the water, step out, and then I have these cushions that I put on the shore. I take everything out. And so like he's babying this kayak for 2 months or something. I mean, who does that kind of stuff, right? But that's what he does. And he's very writing down all his stuff. And his next adventure was he was going to build like a rickshaw, sounded like.
Right.
And he was going to pull a river kayak from where he lives somewhere in Central California down to the Baja because he wanted to go surfing and he didn't want to use up carbon fuel. Didn't want to pollute the atmosphere, so he was going to pull it. Yeah, we're like, wow. You do that kind of stuff?
He also just sleeps out. He just sleeps out. He doesn't. He just goes to. He just finds somewhere to sleep in a town wherever he is. He doesn't rent hotel rooms or anything like that. Very fascinating guy.
Really.
Yeah.
So the kind of people you meet, right? Very interesting. I think you'd agree, Vic and Bart. I mean, these are people who are adventurous. They have to, do something special to be. And this guy, Lauren, I can't remember his last name. He paddled by himself, and he got up as far as Petersburg, and then his hands were in bad shape.
He got a wrist.
So he had to turn back.
He was extremely envious of our wheels.
Yeah. Yeah, because he'd been by himself. And if you're doing this by yourself, man, that's a whole other thing. So anyhow, that's the end for now. We thought we'd leave this shot with you, which I particularly like. And just want to say thanks to everybody we met up there, the bears, the glaciers, and we have a little final video.
This is the more spectacular one here. Does that have more depth or something? They look like huge rocks rising out of the water.
They do, yes, with white bellies.
Henry's trying to help the fish. He's not gonna...
Just to mention the guys, it was so good to meet these guys. You're 1,000 miles from home and it's wild, and then you run into the catfish guys. That was fabulous. Just to backtrack, we had driven up from Victoria to Juneau in Barbara's camper, and we were very enthusiastic. We want to see all these things, and we weren't with these guys. We were a day behind them, and we were on this Baranov that they mentioned about, which took us out to Skidmore, which was a remote area. And we were going along, and there was a guide there, and they said, oh, look, on the shore, there's a grizzly, And the grizzly was tromping along the shore, looking for something to eat. And we thought, well, that's fine. And then about 5 minutes later, the captain announces, and he says, well, we're just going to stop here at this beach here. We're going to let 2 people off. You know, and people are looking around. You know, I mean, and then of course we debarked and we were left on the beach, and they were sort of looking at us kindly, you know, sympathetically, you know, thinking these guys are crazy, you know. And we went down on the shore, and we sort of felt, well, that's fine. But when the boat took off, we felt very lonely. And everybody in their mind was this grizzly walking along the shore, you know, looking for something to eat. And they were sort of looking at us as if we were insane. And we began to think, we maybe are. So it was just great to meet up with these guys, and we had a great old time. But just in one mention, that I was at a Tides and Currents course put on by Siska last winter by Barbara, and of course they talked about the tides, and over there they have these mixed semi-diurnal tides, but there is, somebody mentioned, big tides up to 25 feet. So where you camp is very important. You gotta know. So Vic looks at the tides and says, oh, it's only a 15-foot tide today, you know, that's not hard. Put the tent here, and then at 2 in the morning, I woke up and I heard this flapping noise. I thought, holy smokes, that's close, but at night it always seems that way, doesn't it? Yeah. At any rate, I thought, no, I've read the tides wrong, because they're semi-diurnal, and it's possibly the one at night, which is the high tide. And I, of course, was working on the day tide one. And I thought, oh shoot, 2 o'clock in the morning, out of the tent, over to look up the chart, on with the lights, looking at it. Have I got it right? Have I got it right? Yeah, actually I have. Oh, unusual, but I unusual. And I went back to bed, and there was this lapping noise, and the water was about 4 feet away from the tent, but it was reasonably strong, reasonably high slope, so it didn't actually come. But you know, it gives you scary. It's scary, and they are big tides, and you could easy to screw it up. Off or something.
And we all
anyway,
know
that was one.
And we all know the tide tables are never wrong.
Oh, yeah, right. So, you know, grace to the course of Siska's course that looks at these things. Thank you very much, Barbara.
Mike, you got a
It was
question?
There's one question about the Humpback Whales.
Yeah.
I've been up in that Frederickstown area now for 3 summers in a row for about a month each time. And this last summer was probably the best summer for the bubble net feeding, because they're bubble net feeding for herring or fish, small fish. Their other main prey is krill, and the krill numbers are actually very low this year, or were very low this year. So they actually switch between krill and herring. When they're feeding on herring, they do this cooperative bubble net feeding, and when they're feeding on krill, they're generally mostly solo or one or two.
Cruise along.
They'll dive down 200 feet to the krill layer and just open up and feed on that one. The other thing is that the hydrophone is an amazing tool, because when those guys are doing that bubble net feeding, part of what they do is that they throw out a deafening, super, super loud call that basically scares the bejesus out of the fish and helps push them into that concentrated ball. So, and they also have, there's one of the whales is a caller, and will make a special different call right at the end. So if you have the hydrophone down there, you can actually predict within a few seconds when they're coming up, which makes it a lot easier to get those.
Oh, we gotta get a hydrophone.
Right. Katrina, now you know what you need for
Only 15% off.
Any other questions? I know we've gone on for a while.
Jenny?
Just as a kayaker, and all of you are kayakers, just remember what one of the guys said, is they have no idea where you are. The orcas are dolphins. They do their echolocation.
Yeah, I'll just throw in what they told us about that, because I was going to mention it, but I forgot. That the
And you
humpback,
cannot know where they're going to be.
you don't know where they're gonna come up. The humpbacks do not echolocate, but they do have ears. They can tell noise. So if you're paddling and you're banging on your boat, they're at least gonna be aware that there's something there. Whether they care or not is a separate question. So yeah, you don't wanna get too close.
No, I would wonder if they hear us paddling.
Yeah,
They would certainly hear if you're deliberately banging on
Yeah.
your boat out there,
Yeah.
but just
Yeah.
paddling
I don't think
and
so.
thinking that
Maybe
you
not.
know the direction they're going.
Yeah. Well, when we're watching them feed, they start at one end and they go like this. And not nearly that fast, and then they come back and they go like this. So you have a rough idea. If they go down there, they're gonna come up over there. And as Alan talked about Norio, he got pretty good at, because he wouldn't usually go with any closer than about maybe 100
Because
meters.
he's got a
or something.
lens
He's got
this
a
long.
lens this big. But one time they came up not where he was
Real
expecting them, and they were like right there. But
Yeah,
it's a good point.
they could be dangerous.
Any questions?
Need to let them know about hydrophone.
Yeah, that's right.
You probably all want to get out of here, so, yeah.
What was the average temperature, I mean, for
The-
camping through the day?
The highest daytime temperature we ever had on the whole trip was maybe 20. Most of the time it was probably, 14?
Yeah, around 15 maybe.
Somewhere in
10
there.
to 15.
When we were off the glacier and the wind was,
Oh, man.
and it was only a wee bit above freezing in that wind. And at night, it never froze at night, but it probably went down to like 3 or something.
Yeah, real
And
cold.
this was in July.
But if it didn't rain at night, things dried amazingly well.
Yeah.
That the wind off the glaciers just dried things out. My wetsuit would dry overnight, just hanging outside, which is a real treat.
Treat for all of us,
High temperatures.
Okay.
I know.
Well, as somebody mentioned, the people in Juneau were just saying, this is the worst 4th of July we've ever had.
Yeah, the first part was
But
pretty
I
crappy.
think a mid-July sort of record high in Juneau is probably like 23 or something. You know, okay.
So we were also going to talk about how much this cost. So because honestly, I recommend we don't have fantastic kayaking skills. I'd have to say that. We don't roll reliably. Do we? No, and other people can attest to this. So, but we are careful, and we're maybe more careful now than we used to be when we were a bit younger. But and we kind of make a lot of plans, and we try and stick to the plan and listen to our forecasting and all that. So it's safe enough. And this is not that far, and altogether, I think I ended up putting out about $2,000.
Yeah, I probably spent $3 because I had cabins
Stayed around.
on the ferries, and Lisa met us in Ketchikan on the way back, so she came home on a boat with us for 2 nights. So I definitely had a stateroom for that.
But you know, $2,000 or $3,000. I mean, you pay that to take like a regular vacation somewhere, and this is not expensive when you think about it. It's not that far.
Yeah, it depends on how you compare it, because my idea of trip planning is, well, I'm gonna leave on Monday, I'll be back maybe in 2 weeks, and I need to bring lots of food.
I was going to ask you about your cuisine.
Yeah, what did you do for food?
We all had various kinds of dehydrated food. We do an annual group trip of 5 or 6 or 7 of us, and we share meals. But this one, it's a long time, and you need to pack really small, and we never know if somebody's gonna hurt their shoulder and have to bail out. So we did everything independently. So if somebody had to leave, it was fine. So I had beef stew, turkey chili, and curried lamb, and instant mashed potatoes and rice. And then I had some other things where I'd have a pasta and a can of shrimp and some chopped up fresh carrots and onions. But most of the meals were just like throw my dehydrated stuff in a pot. And it was food that any sort of chili, spaghetti sauce kind of stew recipe that you make and eat at home, you can just make it and put it in a dryer and dry it out and put it in little individual serving baggies. So that's what I ate. It was actually really good.
So how many days were you, did you
We
have
were-
30 days of food?
We had about 3 weeks worth of camping.
And how about water?
There's tons of water. Water everywhere.
What about wine?
Wine, we did have some wine. I had beer. And on this trip, there's a lot of food you can't carry across the border. So we had some sort of basic dehydrated stuff, and then we took the ferry and we crossed the border and we went shopping in Bellingham. But then you're on a ferry for 3 days, so you can't buy like a bag of bananas or something. And then, so when we landed in Juneau, we had to immediately get off one ferry and get on another. So it was all kind of get stuff in Bellingham and dried things, and then it was right up to Bartlett Cove and into Glacier Bay for a week. And then we're back in Juneau, then we could go shopping again. So then we could buy oranges and onions and carrots and potatoes or whatever. But the dried stuff I had 3 weeks worth for the whole trip.
And I skipped drying food this year. I went down to Mac. Well, I went online and bought all my food, and I went and picked it up at Mac. All the prepared food. Why? Because last trip to Alaska, one of my dishes was not a success.
He was kind of stuck with it, so he went with
a dog ate it in Prince Rupert.
I actually ate a couple of his commercial meals, and they're way better than they used to be.
Yeah,
but they're still expensive.
And it's dead easy.
Yeah.
and then Mex sent me a $50 voucher because I spent so much there.
That's all good.
Hey, anybody else?
Anything else?
Nope.
Just the wheels held out, you didn't have to alter them or repair them?
No, I lost one pin. Alan had a spare pin,
extras,
which sort of fit. Mine, we didn't get really good pictures. Yours are pretty much the same. You can get them at MEC and at Ocean River.
And they're foam wheels. They're like they're not.
So
there's no air in
they're
them.
good for 300 pounds or something. Mine are actually homemade, but they did really well.
And you took them apart and stuff?
Yeah, took them apart. I had a deck bag. The wheels come off. Mine break down into pipes with pins, and I just put them in the bag and hooked it on the back deck of the kayak.
Yeah,
They were-
don't get the inflatable wheels, they do go flat.
Yes, they do.
Did you use the wheels in place of the rails and cart?
No. No.
It's an actual railway.
We used the wheels, we had to carry the boats from the beach to get on this wooden boardwalk. And then we put the wheels on. And the width of the wheels was almost the same as the width of the boardwalk. And it was uphill and it was windy. So you had to walk, figuring as long as I stay in the middle of this, and you sort of have to very carefully. And then once we got to the top, there's no way you could wheel past the top. It was, in places you're going across a bridge with a swamp down underneath it. It would have been completely impossible.
It was very pretty up there.
Yeah, and you couldn't wheel along the track because it was just railway ties with spaces between them. In some cases just ground, but in other cases 3 feet of air and just a bump.
We met this guy down at Cape Fanshawe, right?
Yeah.
And he was a nice fella with the Tongass Outfitters or something, and he brought a couple of French tourists up to see the whales, and they're going to go camping and go back to Petersburg or something. And he was keen on what we were doing. He said, "Oh, I used to do that for years, but tourists don't want to do that anymore. Good for you guys out there and stuff." So he said, "Yeah, we did the portage." "Oh, you did the portage. So is it still coming off the track then?" This is not in the tourist information, but right from us. It comes off the goddamn track all the time.
So they come back every year and maintain it to that exact?
Yeah. Somebody somewhere told me about every 15 years they go in there and fix it up, but it's wooden pilings and it's on a swamp, so it's all twisted. Yeah.
So we took if I could just say, we took both the carts down this long day that and they ended up at the cabin. And we're like, well, we should probably have one back at I'm not doing that. We just went to bed. And we thought, Vic and Barbara, they're going like tomorrow. And they might do this. So first of all, I thought, I got to warn them. Like, that is a nasty piece of work. I'll just tell them. So I tried with the InReach to send a message to you guys to say, hey, maybe take a boat around the bottom or something, because this is not good. Anyway, the InReach message got lost in the ether somewhere. They came. In the morning, I get up kind of early. So I'm up early wondering what I can do, and I take a cart back. Good thing, because they came. That day.
Much appreciated, much appreciated.
I was gonna say, if you did it again, would you do that stretch with the cart, or would you do the extra paddle?
Bloody long paddle.
I'd really have to think about it, because
Yeah.
it's 45 more miles, it's 2 days.
Oh, okay.
Two good
Maybe 3
days,
days,
maybe
yeah.
3,
Yeah.
depending on weather, to get into Pat Creek.
Yeah.
And it was, 4 or 5 hours of work.
Yeah.
But at least if I did it again, I would know what I was in for,
Yeah.
rather than expecting this lovely.
Because we had to do 2 trips for the.
Yeah, we had to do 2
because
trips.
We couldn't get all our gear.
And then we got to
all
the
one
cabin
load,
and we were figuring out these crazy mattresses and sorting out everybody's gear, because we kind of piled it on, and couldn't find my sleeping bag.
Oh, no.
Looked all, it was nowhere. So I ended up walking halfway back and found it tumbled off the side. Probably one of the little derailments, it rolled off and we didn't notice, but I found it.
You had the 24-hour daylight, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was light. I don't think any of these pictures made it, but these guys would go to bed early. I stayed up till midnight one night just so I could say I was in the land of the midnight sun. It was sort of evening, but not fully dark, and it was getting light again at 3.
So there's a little sign at the start of the cart track, and there's instructions how to do this.
Oh, yeah.
One of the instructions says, do not pull the cart, only push the cart.
No pulling.
Yeah, well, but.
We did both.
It's really hard
both.
on your back
And
doing this pushing
so
stuff.
So we're pulling it. So I'm pulling it in the front. Alan's pushing, and it kind of gets out of control and takes me right out.
Oh, yeah. He's history.
Just
He's in the swamp.
just huge bruise on my leg.
And then I don't know, you returned the favor. I
Then
guess.
Alan was in the front.
Yeah.
We're breaking the rules again. The cart catches him in the back of the heel,
Clips
ripped
my
up his heel.
Oh, yeah.
Because most of the time it's going so slowly that it's not an issue. But every once in a while it starts to speed up and kind of takes me by surprise.
And it's in a very isolated area.
Yeah,
But I would sort of pull like this, and then so I could jump out of the way.
But halfway across, we came across a great big bear scat
Ah.
on the track,
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a matter of, pushing and then looking over your shoulder. I mean, where would you go? Where would you know where to hide? So, maybe there was a bit of insanity there, and the whole thing.
Yeah, Vic is a bit of a thinker. We were at that campsite at Reed Inlet where the bear was coming around, and we came back, and Barbara was, I think, in love with this bear. You're like, oh, he's such a nice bear.
Yeah.
And Vic was a little skeptical, And so he's coming around quite close, actually. There's a bit of a depression, and then there's Henry's tent, and the bear's there, and we're looking at him, man, that's a big bear. And he's not very far away, and it's amazing how he's just eating his, just doing his own thing. But oh, he's such a nice bear. and Vic's passing comments like, I think he's about the size of a compact car. and then a couple more nice comments, and then Vic says, I think he'd be here in about 3 seconds. We run about 30 miles an hour.
Overthinking it. We were saved by David's wetsuit. Kept the bear away. If it hadn't been for that, God knows what would happen.
There was that.
I'll be here.
There was that, and Henry, because he was like the sentinel, right? And when he got back after the Holy Moses, he gets to his tent, and then he realizes like the bear is very close to him. So he's like, guys, he's really close to me. I mean, really close. And he's just down about 6 feet, and he's about maybe 30 feet over there. We're like, yeah, Henry, it's okay. He knows we're here. Does he know? Because I'm not sure he knows. I'll give him a little air horn, Okay, I hit the air horn, boom, and on the bear just kind of looks around like, no big deal. And he says, the air horn didn't work, Alan. I think we should go for the bear spray. Henry, he's just minding his own business. Holy Moses.
That's perfect. I think it was David's wetsuit. That the bear horn and the bangers, they don't work.
But the funny thing was, he did not pay any attention to us other than to realize we were there, and he was fine. He did his thing and went back up the mountain, right? You were completely right, Bart. And then you go to that packed creek, and these guys have these women, these rangers.
All the rangers were women, yeah.
They're all, but they had like serious.
Because they got negotiation skills.
So they've had some experiences we didn't have, right? I'm guessing. And they're probably being wise about it. Anyway.
But the bear was still there when we went to bed. Yeah.
And he nosed around a bit, right?
Yeah. I heard some couple of footsteps at night, and because we're on this gravel.
Yeah.
And I heard, I thought a person walking, and then I kept waiting for like the kayak hatch to open, and there wasn't any other sound, and I realized, okay, the bear just went by my tent.
Rob says, were you up in the night? No. We don't go outside the tent at night.
No,
For any reason.
Too many bugs.
We got the pee bottle system down.
But there was on the place where you saw us sitting down eating with our bug hats on, there was these big depressions in the
Bear
gravel.
bellies.
And that's where they dig it out and they put their bellies down there and just sit there. So it was a popular spot.
Yeah.
But I had one of the better nights sleep.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm curious, in 3 weeks, how many bug day nights and how many black hat days versus sun hat days? In 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'd have to look in my journal. At Cape Fanshawe, there were basically no bugs. Glacier Bay, it didn't rain much, but it wasn't sunny. It was cool, low ceiling.
Like being in a refrigerator.
The worst rain we had was actually in Juneau. The 2 days that we were in Juneau, it just poured constantly. And the day we left, the sun came out and it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And pretty much all the way down to Pack Creek.
We had some rain.
We had
partway down. Partway
down
after Pack Creek.
Yeah. And we got stuck after Pack Creek. We couldn't get across Seymour Channel for a couple of days because the wind was really bad. And it was rainy, and we had one day we were bowling into waves, like just.
So I'm a big fan of cabins, because that cabin at the end where we stayed for a couple of days.
Thomas Bay cabin.
We could dry out and you know, with 40 or 50 bucks a night, I mean, you would pay a lot more than that.
So I see people wandering off, which is fine, we're keeping you long enough, but if you want to ask anything and you're still here, it's whatever.
Did you make a list of all the things you wouldn't take again?
Things I wouldn't take?
Like extras that you thought, damn, why am I carrying this?
No.